Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa, France 24's program focused on the continent. I'm Charlie James, and these are the headlines. Zimbabwe's opposition rejects President Mnangagwa's narrow election win. This as the president calls for unity and praises the vote as free, fair, and credible. It's deja vu all over again in Mali, where just like 5 years ago, the presidential election heads to a runoff between President Keita and rival Cissé. Our correspondent brings you the latest. And opposition candidate Moise Katumbi says he was blocked from entering the Democratic Republic of Congo. He wants to register as a political candidate, but must be physically in the country to do so. We begin in Zimbabwe, where 4 days ago, after the nation's closely watched elections, anger over the results is far from settled. On Friday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa called for the nation to unite behind him after he was officially declared the winner. He hailed the vote as a fresh start for the country, following the repressive rule of Robert Mugabe. But opposition leader Nelson Chamisa says the official results were manipulated and that he will use all means necessary to challenge it. Maud Julien has the latest.
We don't want anything, we just want answers.
The Zimbabwean riot police tried to break up his press conference by preventing journalists from accessing the site. But opposition politician Nelson Chamisa, who received over 44% of the vote, still managed to deliver his message.
As far as we are concerned, this election, as a presidential result, is fraudulent, illegal, illegitimate, and characterized by serious credibility gaps and some serious legitimacy issues that we feel must be raised.
He says he'll challenge the results in court. They give incumbent leader Mnangagwa the presidency with just over 50% of the vote. On Wednesday, opposition supporters took to the streets to make similar claims of fraud and rigging. They were met with live rounds. 6 were killed. Mnangagwa, meanwhile, claims the poll was free and fair and called for unity in the face of recent unrest.
While the violence of the last few days must be condemned loudly, we cannot allow the violent actions of the few to detract from the democratic expression of the many.
The president promised an independent investigation into the events and said those who wanted to challenge the results in court were welcome to do so. There were hopes in Zimbabwe that the first election since long-term leader Robert Mugabe was ousted would send a strong signal in favor of democracy, but also concerns that the army, which has been overseeing the transition, would be reluctant to disengage from politics.
Mali is in the middle of its own contentious presidential election. In a repeat of 2013, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita will face off against opposition leader Soumaila Cissé in a runoff vote on August 12th. On Friday, Cissé called on political parties to create a broad democratic front against Keita for the runoff. He also said he would not accept the first-round results, in which he garnered just under 18%, because they were marred by irregularities. France 24's regional correspondent, Frank Hersey, is covering this story for us and joins live via phone. Frank, Cissé made it to the runoff against Keita, but is still challenging the result of the first round. How come?
Well, it seems like he's trying to keep his options open and show that he's going to rise above it all and that he's the one with the keenest sense of fairness. And so he said this morning, he had a meeting this morning in Bamako, that the first round of results are the results of fraud and the fruits of gross irregularities and deliberate violations of the electoral law. And so now he's in the position to be able to consider further aspects of electoral law himself. And he's actually having his lawyers looking into lodging an official complaint against those results at the Constitutional Court. He's got until tomorrow night to do that, and then the court has around 3 days to act on that and then announce the next round, which we expect to be Sunday the 12th. And so by doing that, Cissé this morning alleging the fraud again and the ballot stuffing, he's keeping this threat by sort of maintaining his moral pressure, trying to be the good guy. So then later on today, the incumbent president, Keita, spoke at his own rally and said he's happy to win, obviously, in the first round, but despite troubles and some people not being able to vote. And that's his first acknowledgement that there are issues. And so really, Cissé is going to have to work even harder to keep the high ground and portray himself as the good guy fighting the good fight.
Now, in their last face-off in 2013, Keita won handily with more than 77% of the vote. Is that likely to be repeated this time, or could Cissé pull from other parties' support enough to win?
Well, this is the first time in Mali ever that a sitting president had to go to a second round. And this is something that the opposition see as highly significant. And yes, it is a repeat of the 2003 election with Keita versus Cissé. And also this time, Keita has taken an even higher chunk of the first round. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a clear win for Keita. They're both going to have to work hard. Cissé's called for the other candidates to get behind him in a patriotic front. One has so far the only female candidate. But they still have a long way to go. Cissé is going to try and persuade people that more dialogue is good. Keita is probably going to try and use the economy and continuing to build the army. But neither of them have very long, because the next round is just next Sunday.
France 24 correspondent Frank Hersey, thanks for joining us. Moving on now, Congolese opposition leader Moise Katumbi says he has been refused entry into DR Congo. On Twitter, Katumbi wrote that he tried to enter the country through Zambia on Friday, but the border was barricaded. These images show him walking through a crowd of supporters on the Zambian side of the border. Katumbi is one of the main political rivals of President Joseph Kabila. He wants to return home after 2 years in exile to submit his candidacy for December's presidential election. Emerald Maxwell explains more.
Surrounded by supporters, this is Moise Katumbi 2 years ago in the streets of his stronghold in Lubumbashi. Since then, he's been in exile after falling out with President Joseph Kabila. Now he's determined to return to the Democratic Republic of Congo to run for president himself. His path, though, is being barred by Congolese authorities, who have threatened to arrest him if he tries to cross the border. Katumbi is wanted for alleged property fraud and recruiting mercenaries. But with an August 8th deadline looming to put his name in the hat, he told RFI that nothing will stop him.
The government can do what it wants, but I will get home. They have threatened to arrest me, they've threatened to kill me, but I'm going back. I'm not afraid. I have nothing to fear because I have done nothing wrong. I will reach Katanga and go to the headquarters of the CENI.
Katumbi had planned to fly in from Johannesburg, but his spokesman told France 24 that Kinshasa had refused him permission to land in the DRC. The aircraft landed instead in Ndola, on the Zambian side of the border, where authorities are blocking him from taking the road to Lubumbashi to file his presidential bid. His challenge comes hot on the heels of Jean-Pierre Bemba's. The ex-warlord threw his hat into the ring on Thursday after a triumphant return to Kinshasa following 11 years abroad.
I can confirm that I got my electoral card and that I presented all my files to the Independent Electoral Commission. It is now up to them to deal with my candidacy, but I have filed everything.
Bemba spent the last decade behind bars in The Hague, but the International Criminal Court acquitted him of war crimes in June. The Electoral Commission will publish the final list of candidates on the 19th of September.
Staying now in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a new Ebola virus outbreak has the country bracing itself once again. And this time there are added challenges. Parts of the affected area in the northeast are in an active war zone, and it is still unclear whether an experimental Ebola vaccine will be effective against this strain of the virus. Here is the deputy spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General speaking about the outbreak.
WHO said the new cluster of cases is occurring in an environment which is very different from previous locations, as it is an active conflict zone, and added that the major barrier will be safely accessing the affected population.
And finally, there's a food fight underway in Senegal. French supermarket chain Auchan has come under fire from small retailers accusing the company of price cutting. Auchan has opened 25 stores in Senegal over the past 5 years, and marketplace vendors say it's killing their livelihoods. Correspondent Sarah Sacco brings us this France 24 report.
Market stall vendors at one of Dakar's large open-air food and produce markets are up in arms. Businesses are struggling to stay afloat as they lose customers to French supermarket chain Auchan.
Since Auchan arrived, I've witnessed a loss in my profits. I recently had to let 2 of my employees go because I couldn't pay them anymore. I'm very worried because it's becoming really difficult to pay for my stalls at the market.
Increasingly angry vendors want to see their supermarket rival gone. With support from the National Traders and Industrialists Union, they launched a campaign in June called Auchan Lit.
It's terrible. Even this is sold at Auchan. Can you see how they're killing small suppliers? Here as well. Auchan is jeopardizing the country's economy. Why? Because it's going to kill local businesses. Secondly, they practice unfair competition. And today they're monopolizing the market by destroying the whole commerce sector and dictating their law.
Auchan didn't wish to respond to these accusations on camera, but allowed us access to one of its supermarkets. The retailer says it offers affordable prices for everyone, encourages the local economy, and highlighted that it's created more than 1,500 jobs. This customer only shops at the brand's supermarkets.
The prices are quite affordable. You can find quality products and a range of products that you don't get at the market.
A counter-group in support of the supermarket called Auchan Stay was created by the Senegalese National Consumers Union.
Everything here is cheaper. Everything. If for 5,000 francs you get 10,000 francs worth, well, you're going to go where it's just 5,000. And it's good quality. We don't want to go to the local markets. No more.
To appease tensions, the government has announced it's working on a decree to regulate the large retail sector in the country.
That's all for this edition of Eye on Africa, but don't go away, there's more news coming up.